So hi, good afternoon everyone. Thank you so much for coming and learning about this just really incredibly important issue that we'd all like to see addressed, which is, making sure that folks in San Francisco have their mental health needs addressed. We're specifically talking today about SB 1045, which I think everyone knows was passed at the state level, and the Board of Supervisors are going to be weighing in to decide whether or not to implement it here in San Francisco. That's part of the legislation. I'm going to introduce my fellow panelists. I think I introduced myself. I'm Jennifer Friedenbach from the Coalition on Homelessness, and I'm the executive director there, and I've got been there for about 23 years, and one of the first jobs I did when I started at the Coalition was staff the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Work Group. And so this is an issue that I have been pretty involved in over the years. To my right is Susan Misner. Maybe we can give her a warm welcome. Susan directs the Disability Rights Program for the National ACLU. Back in the day, she worked for 8 years at the Homeless Advocacy Project, which is where her and I first met. And I've always had just tremendous respect for Susan. I'm so excited to have her here with us because she brings a lot to the table. And so when she was at Homeless Advocacy Project, she worked really intensely with homeless people with disabilities. To my right is another person that I'm super thrilled to have with us here, someone I also have known for many years and have always really looked up to and just have really enjoyed his eloquence and strong analysis on issues of mental health. C.W. Johnson, maybe we can give him a warm welcome. He's formerly homeless. He has lived experience with homelessness. He's a mental health advocate and outreach specialist at the Mental Health Association of San Francisco. And so he's going to talk today in many ways, his experience is, intersects in these different ways of exactly the people who would be impacted by SB 1045 if we implemented it here in San Francisco. So I'm just really thrilled to have him with us. This thing is really annoying me. Okay. So what we're going to do is do a slideshow. And kind of walk through a couple of different things. We're going to walk through, basically we want to start with what is conservatorship. There's a lot of, people don't necessarily understand what it is now, how it works now. Talk about the mental health system, kind of what that looks like right now in San Francisco, and then we're going to talk about 1045 specifically and how that would change things. That's the plan. So, I wanted to just start off talking about the current mental health system because basically, San Francisco's system is really widely regarded as overly reliant on the high-end services. And what we mean by high-end services is hospital-level care. And this is, instead of getting care in the community, people get care in, basically brought into the system in handcuffs by the police and locked in jails. For many, that's really their first experience with getting mental health services, is either in a locked facility at San Francisco General or mental health services through the jail. So, for most people who think about mental health issues, that high-end level is considered really the most ineffective, the most inhumane, the most expensive level of care. Thank you. In 2016-17, just to kind of give you an illustration of how we're reliant on this high level of care, there was over 6,700 individuals brought to psych emergency services, which is a locked ward where people are typically brought in by police. 4,600 of those patients, or 70%, were homeless. About 40% received no follow-up care. They didn't get a referral to anything. So they were in bad enough shape to be brought in by the police and then within a short amount of time, we're put back out to the streets without any services, not even a referral to an outpatient program. This is from the audit that the city did in the spring. Our situation on the community level of care is so severe that the way that the department prioritizes beds is they wait till the people who have racked up the most amount of money at San Francisco General, and then they get prioritized for bed. They don't even bother tracking turnaways or having a waiting list or anything. So it kind of gives you an illustration of how bad it is, although since they don't do that, we don't have the exact numbers. The thing we do know is intensive case management, and we do know that the need for intensive case management, which is where you have a case manager with a small group of people that they're helping, and that exceeds capacity by 2 to 1. So for every one person who's getting it, there's 2 people who aren't. And then we have this huge other issue that is so interconnected to mental health crises among homeless people, and that's the lack of housing. And so for folks, who are out on the streets and they're getting traumatized over and over again, if they have mental illnesses, their episodes are more frequent, they're more debilitating, and they last longer. And it's also almost impossible to address those issues when you're out on the streets and you're unable to have that, just relief of being able to lock a door and be able to get a good night's sleep. It's really difficult to address. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the funding history. We have, both divestment from mental health services historically and underinvestment of care. The most recent hit happened in the recession, where we got 40 million in direct cuts to behavioral health, to mental health and substance abuse between 2007 and 2012. It hit basically every level of care. So now I kind of want to just shift it up a little bit and talk about the background on the conservatorship laws. We have a long history in California of violating people's basic human rights that have mental illnesses. We were the first city in the U.S. to do ugly laws, made it illegal for people with visible disabilities to appear in public. We involuntarily sterilized more people than any other state in the country. Tens of thousands of people, thousands of people with mental health disabilities were institutionalized indefinitely without due process. Our current laws grew out of a mental health consumer movement, and that's really important to remember, because the attempt was to have this balance between, civil liberties and public safety. The law is called LPS, or Louderman-Petra short. There's other types of conservatorships. We're not talking about those here. How it works is that you require, the standard is you have to be a harm to self or others or gravely disabled. And that means they have there's instructions around gravely disabled, but basically you're unable to provide for your basic needs, food, clothing, or shelter because of the mental health disorder, or they added a number of years ago, impairment by chronic homelessness. Alcoholism, excuse me, sorry about that. So the way it works is that police typically respond to a call, like someone calls and says there's someone in psychiatric crises. They typically handcuff them and transport them to San Francisco General Psych Emergency Services, where it's a locked facility. You can be locked up for 72 hours. Right now, PES is in chairs. You file for conservatorship. There's a due process that goes through, and it kind of just like steps up from there. Once you are put under conservatorship, it's really important to note, and then I'm going to turn it over to Susan, you lose your right to make decisions about where you live, what you do, what you eat, like everything. Like your civil liberties are completely taken away, and and so it's considered the greatest deprivation of civil liberties aside from the death penalty, and I'm going to turn it over to Susan here.
Thanks. Okay. Great, thanks. Yeah, so what's the ACLU doing at this gathering, right? The ACLU cares about civil liberties. And one of the things I want to talk about briefly is just why we're concerned about conservatorship at all. And conservatorship comes from a long history of people sort of throwing up their hands and not knowing what to do about folks who have significant mental disabilities. It has been a long history of very little innovation. Right now, we are learning that there are other approaches besides saying to someone, okay, because you have a mental disability, we are going to put you right here and choose someone else to make decisions for you. It's one person who just then decides where this other person, where someone who has their own opinions, their own needs, is going to live, often who they will or will not be able to see, what kind of medical treatment they may or may not get. There's at least a limit that if you're going to be forced to take medication or forced to undergo unilateral electric shock treatment, there has to be a hearing, another hearing. But it essentially takes away your status as a human being. So if we're going to do it, we want to make sure we've tried everything else possible first. And when you hear us talking about the least restrictive alternative, that's what that means. That we are trying everything else possible first before we take this really drastic action of saying, we're stripping you of all legal standing as a human being, okay? We are particularly worried about expanding when conservatorship can be imposed on people. And that's what SB 1045, what we're here to talk about today, does. So if we just want to make sure that everyone is on the same page as to what this new law does and a few of sort of the limitations on it. There were lots of fights in Sacramento over getting it passed. First, it's only in 3 places. San Francisco, Los Angeles, and San Diego are the 3 counties for this pilot project. It's only for people who've been deemed incapable of caring for their own health and well-being because of severe mental illness and substance use. So, as Jenny was saying, the severe mental illness was how it started, alcoholism got added, and now substance use has been added to it as well. So, there are limits to who can recommend someone be put under this new type of conservatorship. It either has to be the sheriff because they've got someone in their jail who they think would qualify, or the director of the Department of Public Health because someone has been using public health services, or the head of a hospital where often it's a psychiatric hospital where they think that this is the necessary step. In order to qualify, they have to have been 5150. That means involuntarily detained because of a mental health crisis at least 8 times within a 12-month period. I want you to talk about some of the concerns there. And the other coerced treatment option called assisted outpatient treatment, AOT, has been tried, or it's not been approved. In order to try AOT, you have to get a court to approve it. But if the court either didn't approve it or the court approved it but it wasn't sufficient, that has to happen. And then, again, this 3rd step, which is really important, there isn't anything else that's going to work for this person. Okay? It's the least restrictive option. Okay. So, the city wants to implement SB 1045 very quickly. But there are a number of steps, again, because there were advocates up in Sacramento saying, whoa, 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 slow this down. You have to do something first. You have to create a plan. That plan has to be in consultation with disability rights rights groups, supported housing providers, public health, law enforcement, labor, hospital staff. They also have to certify that no voluntary services, mental health services, supported housing, etc., would be reduced because SB 1045 is implemented. That's going to be a really interesting and tricky part of the process. And then finally, they have to certify that a range of housing services, supported housing, and other services are going to be available, that there's funding for them, that they are available for the folks that they want to put under SB 1045, and that they're culturally appropriate. So I'm going to turn it back to Jenny to just talk about some of the specific concerns about this. Even with these safeguards, there are lots of concerns about implementing this.
Yeah, just, there's, like Susan said, there's a lot, there's some safeguards in place, but there's some fundamental problems that does not correct. And one of the fundamental problems is that the entire decision-making about who goes into this process is in the hands of the police. So as you noted that, what Susan said is that you have to be 5150 8 times, and then that's what makes you qualify. So if you think about it, what that means is that a police officer can just 5150 you 8 times, and even though they bring you to San Francisco General, and the psychiatrist says you don't meet the standard to be 5150 to release you back to the street, that still counts as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Every time that happens, you lose your property. It's very traumatizing. And then suddenly, magically, after 8 times of this kind of harassment, potentially, magically, you qualify. Police officer is not a professional, is not a psychiatrist, they're not looking at any standards, they're just 5150 you over and over again, based on probably a complaint. So race and class and all these things enter into that equation, obviously, very dramatically. So I wanted to do that comment, and then I'm turning it over to CW. Actually, you got your own. Just really quickly, we're going to leave this up, but a lot of people say, what can we do? We need to do something. Anything is good. Well, actually, we don't need to do anything. We need to implement a system that really works for people, and we have this opportunity with Prop C. It's going to be $75 million a year to really build our system at all levels. And this is all kind of no-brainers, but basically we want a system that doesn't put police at the front, and that really truly meets people's needs. So they don't even need to be 5150 under the current law, except in rare occasions, rather than how it is now, which happens all the time.
Hello, my name is C.W. Johnson. They asked me today to come here and share my story, but as we know, our stories are very complex. We're happy, we're frustrated, we have trauma, we have good times, and so telling a story in that sense it's just too long and too much, and I don't think you guys have a couple of weeks to be here. So what I'm gonna do is tell you about the first time I was in the hospital and what it felt like and what it was versus what it is now, what my last time in the hospital was and what that was like for me, and the difference, and why SB 1045 is not something that will work, simply because I feel that it's targeted to a certain type of people or a certain type of group, and any time that the police have to be the lead way, I have a problem with that. Maybe it's just me, but who knows. So let me just say, my name is C.W. Johnson. I've had, I first started experiencing mental health issues at the age of 13. The first time that I actually was put into the hospital, I was 18 years old, I was in Los Angeles, and I was feeling suicidal. I mean, I was having racing thoughts, voices, whatever you name it, I was going through it. And so I got on the suicide hotline that they had, and told them what I was feeling, what I was going through, and somehow they connected me with the non-emergency police of Los Angeles, and they came out and actually took me to the hospital, though of course they handcuffed me, threw me in the back of the car like I was some kind of criminal, like I committed a crime. The only crime I was thinking about committing was maybe knocking myself off and making the world a little better. Don't see how that caused them to just, you know, basically emotionally and physically beat me up. So we get to the hospital, and it's a 72, because I called it was a 72-hour hold. Now let me dispel some rumors that you may have. First of all, I've never been arrested, I never was incarcerated in jail. I was definitely incarcerated across this country in hospitals. That was my form of jail. Also, the funny part about all of this is that once I got in there for a 72-hour voluntary hold, they called my parents, my guardians at the time, and they said, we want him to stay here a little longer. And so they signed away my rights. My 72-hour voluntary hold, because I was feeling suicidal, became into a 6-month hospital incarceration. I do mean incarceration. They took away my rights. I was given medications that was not explained to me. I was locked. Whenever I complained about something, I was strapped to the bed because I was considered a nuisance, or I was considered a violent simply because I voiced my opinion that this is making me sleepy, or this is making me drool, or I can't comprehend what you're saying to me. Can I talk to someone about this? No, you have no rights to talk to anyone. That was my first induction into the hospital. And so after 6 months, you figured that they're going to have all these wonderful things for me, right? 6 months, they had 6 months to give me housing. They had 6 months to make sure that I had peer support, which we definitely have a lot of at MHA. They were in a position to do whatever it takes to make sure that this does not repeat. Guess what they did for me? Nothing. They put me back outside homeless. They even called a cab to at least take me downtown where I could get into a shelter. Nothing happened. Wow. And so what happened from there? I continued to be homeless. I continued to stress. I continued to end up getting locked up all across this country. They might have saved me 30 years if they would just, the services would have been there, if the care would have been there, if the peer support would have been there, if someone actually gave a damn more about taking care of me than trying to save money from the system, you know. And so let me tell you my last stint in the hospital. Fortunately, it was before the $40 million cuts. I got, my last stint was in San Francisco General. And at that time, when we went to San Francisco General, was another 17 voluntary hold. I stayed there for about 2 weeks, and after 2 weeks, they had housing for me. I was able to meet with a case manager. I was able to get into a place called Sunset Mental Health Center. I was able to go to a 24-hour shelter while I waited for my bed to open up. They had direct access to services. So that really started me on my road to recovery. So now I had my rights taken away and was given nothing. I was voluntary hold in San Francisco in general when they had the services and when they had the shelters and when I got into that shelter, I didn't have to pay for the shelter. The income that I had, I was able to save my money up and then get housing. So I got help to get my first and last month rent. And you say, well, what that has to do with SB 1045? If you have all these, if you have peer services, if you have good mental health services, if you have wellness centers, if you have places to go, if you have shelter, if you have these things in place, SB 1045 does not exist. If you put back that $40 million, rather than build a stadium for the Warriors, and I love the Warriors. Big fan. I was just playing them on the video game about 10 minutes ago. But I would rather for the Warriors to stay in Oakland, and I would rather for them to stay in Oakland and spend that money on what is necessary. Not SB 1045, but us. People need housing. People need help. The longer you're outside, the longer that you're dealing with stress, police, being waking up 5 o'clock in the morning, have a dog sitting on your chest because you're staying down in Golden Gate Park, you don't need that. You need help, you need support, you need housing, and you need peer support. You need people that have been through what you've been through, helping you through the process. So if we can get those things that are already in place and put that money back to behavioral health services, then we can start to really address the problem of homelessness, mental health, and drug abuse. Other than that, we're just spinning the wheels. We're just eating a very nice poison cake. And for me, this whole thing is about trauma detention. You're detaining me because of my trauma, and you're adding more trauma. So it doesn't work for me. That's my personal opinion and my personal experience. But I just want to know what you guys think.
So let's give it up. Hey. So we're going to be doing a number of things in this next section. I just want to do some housekeeping stuff. One of the things we want to start doing is collecting people's experiences that that have been through the system. We are doing these video testimonials. There's folks with tablets that can record your stories, and if people at the end take the time to do that, we'd appreciate it. We also have questionnaires, so we can start building some, just some documentation and really trying to capture people's voices in this process. But at this point, Jessica and Ray are coming up, and we're gonna be doing some pairing and sharing. We're gonna be doing. You'll still have a chance for question and responses from the panel, and also a chance for to make comments and stuff like that. And so these guys are gonna handle this section. Thank you.
Thank you. Another big hand for C.W. Johnson, Jennifer Friedbach,